into their ceiling, and their ceiling cannot go past logic. So they made Albert Einstein the poster boy for all things to try to live up to. But he's actually at the floor. All he ever talked about was the next level was imagination for them. Imagination is the key. Imagination is the greatest thing you can ever accomplish in the universe. Because he knew niggas got the greatest imagination going. Look how we survived in the ghetto. Look what we turned food into. That's from imagination. That's not from logic and equations on the board. How to turn the last part of that corn into grits, nigga. You feel me? How to make a biscuit for 15 cents, nigga. Like, nigga, that's us. And that's not from logic. That's from imagination, visualization. That's who you are. And we have put those aspects of us to sleep. They gave us this motherfucking bullshit story in school. When you're little, stop looking out the window, pay attention, sit up straight. And then they put on everyone's report card, regardless of what you were doing. Daydreams too much. Daydreams too much. Snap out of it. Look up straight. Fold your hands. Pledge allegiance. Stand up. Sit down. Buzzer. And they're keeping you at a young age from freeing your mind through your visualization and imagination. When you was in Africa and they was teaching you, they told you in story form because it forces you to imagine. It forces you to imagine. If I say I was going to the store the other day, I fell off my bike, you guys are automatically thinking about it in real time, meaning you are imagining me on my bike as I tell a story, falling off of it. Not when you read a math equation, you can't imagine. It's telling you trying to memorize. That's a difference. So the African told you the story about the tree, the history of the tree, the science of the tree, the math of the tree. You ate from the tree. You've been eating from the tree. You picking the fruit from the tree. You climbing from the tree. You doing all of that shit to understand this tree holistically. Because we're putting it into our psyche, into our imagination. We have a memory of climbing that tree. I remember damn near every tree we used to climb in the hood when me and Dane was just young boys running wild in the ghetto. I remember almost every tree and everything we fucked with because it's a part of my imagination and much more powerful than anything I remember in math. But that's not how white minds work. They are, for them to have an imagination or a visualization experience, it must be extreme. That's why they jump off of mountains, jump out of airplanes. Even though we started bungee jumping through ritual, now it's fun for them. You ever go to Six Flags and there's those rides off in the sunset with cranes and shit? Motherfuckers just flying around on cranes. I'm like, what the fuck? Why don't you just stay? Ain't this enough? The Superman, the Roller Shack coaster, that's not enough. They got cranes and niggas just on cranes flying around. So they need that because that's where they're actually deficient. Because that's your imagination is what gets you out of here. That imagination is connected to your meditative force. Your ability to imaginate to power becomes when you're able to stay, you're able to create and go into a Zen mode easier. Now, when I told my father I still meditated, I said the only thing that happens is when I close my eyes, it looks like the scene is jumping back and forth in front of me. And I said I could get there any second. It's to a point where I could stay in alpha and still have a conversation. In my most meditative mind, I know how to get there and zone out easy. I could be yelling at you niggas in 1 minute and go on the next. And I told him I could do this. He was like, that's incredible. That's alpha state. He said that's the goal of meditating, to try to get an alpha state and stay there. I said, well, for all of these years, that's all I've been doing because I didn't know what else to do. It was just there. So I've always, after that, understood what I was going for. He then started telling me about some out of body experience he's had. He told me some shit that was key that might have changed the way I thought about meditation, period, which was this. In New York, especially in the 80s, which this was, the trains were fucking incredibly noisy. They're still noisy now, but they're almost zen compared to that fucking aluminum can that used to be on the tracks before. Now they got shocks and they factor that in. People used to actually wear earplugs on the train. Some were louder than others. They screeched, they made noise. So what he was told me was, instead of trying to meditate and block that out, meditate to that sound, which is probably some of the most powerful advice he gave. He said he had out of body experience meditating to the sound of the train. Hank will attest to how noisy that shit was in the 80s, especially. It's like it was unbearable. But what it did was I started practicing on keeping the mind still. You understand what I'm saying? In chaos. Perfect. When people whisper around me, I can't meditate. That's the only thing that takes me out of it. When somebody's like, yeah, we need to do this. But it could be a whole room full of motherfuckers talking. I can zone out. It's crazy because that's what I practice on the New York City train, zoning out to a bunch of motherfuckers. Now, what it turns out is the train is the subconscious song that you hear constantly that you don't pay attention to. In fact, in New York, you train yourself not to pay attention to it. In Queensbridge, there's a bridge over us, and you hear 24 hours cars going over the bridge. Zoom, doom, 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 zoom, doom. It's so subtle that you can actually fall asleep to the shit. It's like beautiful in Queensbridge. And in fact, when I been moved out of Queensbridge years later in the 2000s, started fucking somebody from the hood and spent the night back in the hood, I was like, God damn, this is the best goddamn fucking sleep I've had in years, because it's the subconscious song that was playing since I was born in the background. So when I decided to meditate to the sounds of New York, which is the subconscious song, motherfucker. Now, I don't know where you live because most people got to drive to where they live and things like that. So it's not necessary. But for a city person, that was a good one, because what it did was allow me to stay in a moment through chaos all around me. I'm able to read through chaos, but that's a New York mind. Now, so alpha state is the party. Alpha state is the party. So remember, you got to close your eyes and think of this. Now, what he told us when he was 8, I've always given this meditation out, is think of an apple. And with my mind, use all 5 senses or experience that apple in my mind with all 5 senses. The more detail, the better. So what I'm doing now is mixing my earthly reality, or what I've become through my earthly reality, just an entity of 5 major senses, and to turn those inward and use my imagination to experience. So now what I'm doing is exercising the imagination, number 1, and number 2, taking what I know from earth and now mixing it with my imagination. Therefore, what I do on earth through the 5 senses is now starting to connect with my imagination. That's the key. Remember, your imagination is what you're trying to strengthen. Your imagination is really your superpower. You have to be able to see it in your head before anything can manifest. That's why you're the greatest inventors. So instead of taking them with your pride and say, oh, we invented the light bulb, the peacock feather,